here I think we figured out the incentive model. Instead of trying to go after non-profits because, should we make the non-profits pay because they are getting a bunch of tools, they're becoming more efficient. Instead of going after non-profits and making them pay, we were like, hey, non-profits, you do your work. That's your forte of like social impact. We will not charge you anything. It's going to be free for you. We'll make the corporates pay because they have to instead hire a big team and whatever and do stuff. Rather than that, they use this tool. It's going to save on headcount. So there was a clear fit. And then we are able to make enterprises pay. And I figured out that enterprises, it's a huge problem. They're spending something like $5 million, $10 million. And for them, rather than hiring somebody and trying to get that person to manage some 40, 50 NGOs in different countries, it's going to save a lot of time. For me, my love started with Kudera because we've played around a lot of things. We tried different go-to-market motions, different monetization models. And yeah, there were times we literally killed a product and again, we would build something from scratch. So I think Kudera was my playground to actually understand which segment and which go-to-market works for me.
Welcome folks to yet another episode on Growth BTS, a very interesting initiative by Segwise and the Product Folks. Today we're very excited to host Asif. Asif, it's been a long time scheduling this. We're very excited to finally host you today. Folks, Asif has had a very interesting career across startups in India and the Bay Area. You would have heard of companies he's worked across, Freshworks being a very interesting startup in India, which is something we'll be going deeper into in today's conversation. Post which he had, an entrepreneurial stint. He did an MBA from a top tier college in the US and is currently heading product growth at Twitch. Right, so very interesting career. We unfortunately might not have as much time to go into the nuances in each one of these, but we have something very excited lined up for you. With that, I'd love to also invite Brijesh, who's my co-host for today. Brijesh, how are you feeling today?
All good, man. Welcome, Asif. So happy to have you on the pod again.
Thanks,
Lovely,
Brijesh.
lovely to sort of get this going with you and get into like some of the stuff that we want to get into on some items that you worked on in your career.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Brijesh, and thanks to us. Really nice welcome. And nice to do this with you.
Thanks, Asif. Asif, just to kick things off, multiple products that you've worked across.
Yeah.
In every career, there are certain inflection points. Given the wide range of experiences you've had, are there one or two such inflection points that you could recollect? It could be, products that you worked on. It could be people that you worked with. What are the top two things that come to mind?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I usually, when I look back at things, or even in general, how I take decisions when it comes to where I work, it's always been people. I do love the products I worked on, the problems I've solved, but I think it's people that inspire me, and that's how I've taken decisions. This will sound like flattery, but it's not. Honestly, Brijesh was actually one of the important people who played a role in how I taken one of my product decisions. So I think this was when I was actually between my Kudera and Freshworks stint, actually, because I was at Bangalore. Kudera was an early stage startup. When I say early stage, it's like Series A, Series B kind of phase. And it's been 3 years, learned a bunch of things with product, and yeah, like built a product from scratch with a bunch of engineers, learned a lot of new things, worked with enterprise customers. And then I was not sure what to do next. I was like, oh, should I go do an MBA? Should I go and work on different products? And I think at that point, Brijesh was doing his new startup, I think Townsy, I think at that point. Yeah. So I remember calling him. It's like, and he's one of, so Brijesh and I went to the same undergrad school, and he was one of the earliest product managers from our batch. And I just picked the phone and called him, hey, dude, like, I just need to talk to you. Like, tell me what's your thing. You've been oscillating very seamlessly between being an entrepreneur and then this product manager. How is that going for you? And then he was like, yeah, I don't remember the exact words he used, but he was like, yeah, I'm just going after problems and the ownership, and then I would love to just go and solve them. And then that was a very simplistic statement, but then I figured out that, yeah, like I just need to go and find my next calling rather than trying to fit into his mold. Oh, do I do an MBA at this point? Do I do this? It's not about moves. It's about identifying the problem and people to work with. And that's how I actually found my next stint at Freshworks. I actually ran into this guy like Rohit, and he was like, he's also actually a Bitsian. And then I met him at this event in Bangalore, and then we just started talking about things. And I was telling about how I love solving enterprise customer problems. And then he was like, "Oh, maybe you might be a good fit. Let's just talk about it." And then we had an interview, and then a bunch of things happened. And decided to move my life to Chennai, and all of that happened. So definitely, one inflection point was talking to Brijesh at that point, rather than trying to do which schools to apply for and all that. So rather than fitting to a mold, I think it was nice to start thinking about, oh, like what really matters to me. Is it the people? Is it the problem? And then I started getting that answer to myself, that I think it's people that matter, because I love enjoying and working with people. The problems, you always pivot, you do different things, right? Like you don't even know if you're going on the same problem after a bunch of few months. So yeah, for me, that conversation helped. And then several years later, it's, I think, the Chatgpt thing I was telling you earlier in the day about. I was doing my startup at Berkeley, and then it was it was called SocratiQ. We were trying to do civility, use NLP for civility. So basically, it's about what Grammarly was doing for content creation. We were like, hey, like when people have to interact in workplaces, especially, there are times when you end up saying some insensitive or biased statements. How can we help you with input there? And that's where I think, interestingly, tech kind of played a role. I was like, I think I was able to. I shouldn't say I became a visionary, but I think I was able to see some patterns. I think I figured that there is no way this is how the underlying LLM layer is going to be. People are going to make advanced layer like LLM models, and I don't think we should be using these to solve NLP use cases. And I literally paused, and 6 months later, we had this revolution of ChatGPT coming out, and then now things look so different. So for that startup, I literally put on pause, and I was like, "Oh, okay, this is a huge tectonic shift. I need to like prepare for." And if anything, it turned out to be much bigger than I had imagined. And now we are all sitting here trying to figure out what we should do in the post ChatGPT world. So I would say, yeah, these are two big inflection points in my life, at least from what I've observed so far.
Nice, nice. Okay, that's a very interesting one, Brijesh. Maybe time for me also to set up more coffee chats with you, get some of these insights. But yeah, maybe time time to jam right into it.
Yeah, I think I didn't expect that, to be very honest. I think I remember this conversation now. I was sitting in a co-working space when Asif called me, and I remember having this chat saying, "Look, I just start working on things that I feel are hard and fun to work on," and this is a classic. I feel like 20s PM way of like thinking about life. But I'm happy it helped you to make some decisions at least. It's actually very interesting because I think you went from Goodera to Freshworks to MBA and then Splunk and then finally to Twitch Infra Video. Uh, I actually wanted to jump in on a couple of things. One is you seem to have a general love for enterprises and solving enterprise problems. That itself is very intriguing to me as to how, because I come from this universe of like consumer and love for building things which have extremely short feedback loops. And one of the things that I'm rewiring my brain to be okay with is to the feedback loops in the B2B world is like a lot more longer and probably even a little different. How and why did you end up with this love for enterprise problems and PMing in that universe?
Yeah, interesting question actually. Because I I think this happened at Goodera, because before Goodera, I was doing my own edtech startup and like doing different things in public policy. Yeah, like my life before Goodera was very different. Like it was this early 20s guy being super passionate about solving. I mean, it was literally almost like the world hunger problem. I was like, yeah, I'm going to make social impact measurable. I'm going to make it extremely easier to solve, real time impact, and all that. Like all those things that you would imagine, but you just don't know how to get to it. So I try to pick up education tech and I just try and go solve it. But I don't think I was able to figure out how to make it work. Like if we built a great product, it was loved by users. In fact, interestingly, I remember Emmett Shear actually like Twitch CEO ended up saying this, that it's good to actually get some people to love your product rather than having a lot of people like your product. So I think I was this pure, passionate guy just trying to build an amazing MVP, got people to like try it out. People loved it. But then we weren't able to figure out monetization at all. Like people weren't willing to pay. Like we hadn't thought about who is going to pay for this product. And it was again enterprise. It was meant for schools. Schools were going to use it and teachers were going to input data. And then we had feedback from students and like student performance being measured. At the face of it, seemed lovely product, but yeah, who's going to pay? Will schools pay? Why will they pay for this? Because the school's revenue model is something else. People, parents are sending kids because the school has international standards providing edtech or e-learning or whatever stuff. So it was not aligning with their incentives. So this is when I think I failed. I actually didn't figure out how to solve this problem really well in edtech space. And then the good era stint happened. And in good era, we realized that same thing. You can't, it was again social impact from for corporate social responsibility, wherein we can make corporate social responsibility funds measurable. There, I think we tried to get this right. Instead of trying to go after, so here the model is companies spend money, give money to nonprofits. Nonprofits go and do impact in any space. And we were this product that companies could use to measure impact, and nonprofits had to input data. So very similar, like teachers, students have to input data and then output. Here, I think we figured out the incentive model. Instead of trying to go after nonprofits because, oh, should we make the nonprofits pay because they are getting a bunch of tools, they're getting becoming more efficient. Instead of going after nonprofits and making them pay, we were like, hey, nonprofits, you do your work. That's your forte of like social impact. We will not charge you anything. It's going to be free for you. We'll make the corporates pay because they have to instead hire a big team and whatever and do stuff. Rather than that, they use this tool. It's going to save on headcount. So there was a clear fit. And then we are able to make enterprises pay. And I figured out that enterprises, it's a huge problem. They're spending something like $5 million, $10 million. And for them, rather than hiring somebody and trying to get that person to manage some 40, 50 NGOs in different countries, this is going to save a lot of time. And that's how it started the enterprises. And then it became like, and that's when I started understanding, oh, like the enterprise play is very different from SMB because we did try to experiment with SMB play. We figured out it's going to be very hard because of the volume thing and we won't be able to get it right. We stuck to enterprises, a few corporates, and that's how we got our PMF initially, like product market fit. And then slowly we realized, oh, it's better to like stick to a few whales or a few enterprises and they will get things going. And I think spending those 3 years figuring out which segment to go after and how do we actually build B2B products for enterprise segment, I should say I figured out the go-to-market play there. And that's how the rest of my career decisions ended up being that I think Freshworks was that SMB play, and then they were trying to do enterprise play. So I think for me, my love started with Kuda because we've played around a lot of things. We tried different go-to-market motions, different monetization models. And yeah, there were times we literally killed a product and again we would build something from scratch. So I think Gudera was my playground to actually understand which segment and which go-to-market works for me. And honestly, yeah, like you said, enterprise play is a little hard. Like you have to go into the exec meetings, long lead times. But then the good thing is they actually also help you build your product. Rather than spending so much time looking at data and then trying to figure out stuff, you actually get to directly talk to the customer. Like I literally used to spend hours and hours in Mumbai, like with this one customer we used to work with. So Tata Trust was our customer. And we spent hours and hours in their offices trying to understand how it works because, yeah, few customers, few users, spend time with them. And then, of course, you have to come back in a drawing board and be like, well, are you seeing patterns among these 5, 6 people you spoke to? And then are you able to identify the persona and journey? So I think that's the play I'm more familiar with. And if anything, that has helped. If anything, now I'm trying to figure out how to balance both the segments because now in my current role, I'm actually doing more on the SMB play and understand how that works. So I think you should, as a PM, should do both. But I started with the enterprise play.
No, makes sense. It's actually a good segue into the feature that you wanted to speak to us about, which is building search readiness for Freshworks for the enterprise. Usually, what we love to do is get a background of what was happening when this sort of became a problem. Like, what was the company doing? What year are we in? How big is Freshworks then? Why is search important for Freshworks? What was your team thinking like why did this become a problem? And then of course, what were you thinking? Like, why did you even want to go work on this problem statement? That setup would be great, and then we can get into sort of how did you identify this to be a problem and then went about solving it.
Yeah. So yeah, this was around end of 2018, and I mean, just a quick refresher. So Freshworks went IPO, I think, in 2021. Yeah, somewhere around that timeline. And I think it was very apparent that it was already known that Freshworks is going to go IPO. Like that was something that was already being expected in investment circles. And in fact, when I took the decision, should I leave Bangalore and move all the way to Chennai to Freshworks? Yeah, that was like the very interesting problem statement that I wanted, or the story that I wanted to be associated with. It was like, oh, like go to a pre-IPO company and then see what that looks like, because I never had these plans of moving to the US. So I was like, yeah, I'll be this PM solving interesting problems. And anyway, I think I figured out at that point that I'm going to be this B2B SaaS PM. And Freshworks is the leader in that space, and if anything, like they've led to like so many other startups coming up after that, and Chennai has become this SaaS hub now. So I was like, okay, maybe like I'll just go to Chennai and then figure out how Freshworks is doing it, and if it's pre-IPO, they're going to do a lot of things right and make sure that they're ready for public scrutiny. So it's an interesting phase to be in, and that's when I met this manager, Rohit Agarwal, and then I remember talking to him, and he was like, hey, we started off. So if you understand the landscape, so Freshworks came in later, but we already had Zendesk and Salesforce. These both were good at enterprise play, and Freshdesk started off with the SMB play. So they were really good with. You have like 3 support agents. So yeah, just a quick refresher. Freshdesk is a ticketing software, and slowly they started off adding with other like Freshchat, Fresh Sales, and other their portfolio. So Freshdesk as a ticketing software is probably used by almost all the big B2C companies in India. I don't want to take their names, but almost every popular company that you know in India which interacts with users through their mobile apps, you must have interacted with Freshdesk. Uh, Even now, when I'm in India and I interact with somebody, I randomly talk to the agent saying, "Hey, by the way, I was a PM for this product." So yeah, like it's very nice to actually see how the product has been evolving. And yeah, so going back to the story, so my manager was like, hey, we are trying to figure out his enterprise play. You seem to have done enterprise play at Kudera. Maybe the scale is different, but the problems are going to be similar. We have to be ready for, I mean, enterprise customers have different needs, like admin functionalities. You have to have audit trail. You need to have service bureau, a bunch of things. And also, yeah, you have to think about scale. So that is when I was brought in, and then we divided the product into two aspects. Like there was this PM leading the admin side of the functionalities, and then there was a PM leading the agent side, like the support agent experience. So when an agent is interacting with customers, they need to have their control panel and then a bunch of things that they need to have access to, so that you don't have to deal with the agent and tell him, hey, I told this to somebody 3 days ago. I already shared this context with you. Why are you asking me these questions again? So you don't deal with all that. So you need to have this control panel for the agent. So I was a PM for that side of the product. And the interesting thing is, we assumed early on that that side of the product may not need a lot of work when you're thinking about enterprise customers, because it's the same thing, right? The same agent, instead of having maybe 10, 20 agents, you probably have hundreds of agents in this company now, because the scale is huge, multiple geographies. Yeah, we are just probably dealing with how to be ready for scale. That's it, probably. So that's how I was brought in, and then they were like, okay, yeah, just figure out. And we have a bunch of bugs going on, and then we have to figure out for scale, and then there are these few enterprise customers we are onboarding, so figure it out. And yeah, so that was the context. And then, so to your thing about making the search ready for enterprise customers, what we've realized is that, like I was saying earlier, like when you have like a lot of these SMB companies with 10 agents, 20 agents, at the most, the volume of tickets that you're dealing with, maybe in a span of 2 to 3 years of they being onboarded the product, are still like 100,000 tickets, maybe. That's it, like max, like probably at the scale you're talking about. But then when you start onboarding these global, multi-geography, multilingual customers, then you realize that you're dealing with millions of tickets, and then sometimes even like reaching up to even 100 millions of tickets. In fact, the time that I started in the product, we were onboarding this massive customer, very popular in the US, and they're North America based. And then I remember the customer success manager and account managers used to regularly call me, hey Asif, like forget millions, man. Like we're onboarding this customer and they're going to migrate from their current tool to this fresh test, and the migration itself has 50 million. And I was like, oh wow, like okay. So again, enterprise play. When you start enterprise customers, you actually spend a lot of time actually thinking about the migration. Migration takes a lot of time. Actually, creating migration templates is one huge ass task that we have to spend a lot of time with. And it's something I dealt with Goodera a lot of times. Every enterprise customer we dealt with, the first thing we're thinking about is, okay, how do we migrate them from their existing tools? They must have been using like these 5, 6 tools. How do we first bring them onto our product? You have to, yeah, some products do like API integrations easily. Some have to do something very basic as CSV exports. Sometimes you just have to have a pre-sales integration guy just spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to put all of this into the product and make the product look like it's theirs now. So that was a phase we were dealing with. And yeah, let me pause there. Like, do you have any questions before I go into the problem?
No, I think this is good as a setup. I know where Freshworks is just moving into enterprise. We
Yeah,
see why the problem was important, and I see what changes in search when you move from SMBs to enterprise. I think that's a good setup.
yeah,
Within that, what specifically became like a challenge that you sort of worked on?
yeah. So there are actually three interesting projects that we worked on at that time. In fact, just for context, like I never worked on search in the past. Like this is the first time I'm dealing with search myself. Because yeah, in Goodera, we didn't need to search. Again, we didn't have that kind of volume. Like yeah, they were making grants and all that, so there were dashboards. So I was spending a lot of time on analytics products. Like customers wanted to drill down by different things. Yeah, like by geography, by region, in terms of their funds and all that stuff. And then we spend a lot of time on making the product enterprise ready because enterprise customers have very, very unique and bespoke requirements on how their dashboards have to look. So it's hard to build like a set of 6 graphs and say, hey, this is a template for impact measurement. No, nobody's going to buy that. Like CXOs have different set of requirements in different meetings and different contexts. So that was the play I was doing. So search, I did not think it was going to be such complex problem. Like honestly, it was like new to me as well. And then I'll tell you how it all started. So I remember once we did this migration of 50 million tickets, um, I think some of their yeah, like I think we're doing pilot phase where some of their agents were trying to come and use the product and validate if this is all looking good kind of phase. And some of the agents started using it, and then I think these were agents in Philippines, if I remember right. Yeah, Philippines, and some of them were also yeah, like in most of them in APAC region, like across APAC. And so Freshworks operate all regions, so we didn't have anything. We weren't expecting something new, and then we hear, I remember 3 distinct complaints. One was, hey, the search is extremely slow. Yeah, like it's taking me forever to get to like finding a ticket that I created in the last 10 days. I was like, okay. Then next is like, hey, so many times I'm running into no result found scenario. And I don't know why it's happening. Your search is again bad. And then third was like, yeah, I mean, I don't think you support our languages. Again, these 3 comments and no details. Like I literally get an email saying, hey, Asif, the customer has given very specific input, and I get these 3 statements saying, can you please make the search better? And the customer is going live. And I think I was told we are supposed to be live with the customer in a month. We already like at CXO level conversations both on Freshworks and on their side have happened that they're onboarding you. Right now it's pilot phase. We're going to test things out and we're going to go this grand live thing is going to happen in a month. And okay, I get these 3 statements. Then I try to dig around a bit, get on a few calls, and then I'm like, hey, can I talk to the agents? They're like, no, you won't be able to talk to them. They're in these different geographies, language problems, whatever. Like, let me know what you really want. I'll try to get that information. I was like, okay, please send me screenshots and all that because yeah, basic troubleshooting. I need to know like what's going on. What was the query? What is this no result found? And what do you mean you're not supporting languages? We have like these plethora of languages we support. And what do you mean slow? Like, be more again specific. Like, are you talking about 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 30 minutes? What is it? Again, all these things were missing. Fine, we gather all that. We have a sense of what's going on. And then I go to the engineering. So the way it works in Freshworks is we have these solution architects. So let me backtrack a bit. So the way it works on the engineering front at Freshworks is we have these engineering managers and then solution architects. Solution architects generally tend to be like a extreme technical. So I think in different companies, they're sometimes also called as principal engineers. Yeah. Basically, I see folks who have in-depth understanding of the architecture and who are the people who usually sign off on any engineering decision or product feature. Like if they are like the gatekeepers of any features. Like if they don't approve, they never just get done. So I remember going to the solution architect, very smart guy, and I was like, hey, I think I understood what's going on, and I have some thoughts on how to fix this. And then the first reaction I hear is, hey, and then he goes back to the entire context. He gets me into the history of the company. He's like, yeah, it's been 8 years. We've been only focused on SMB. Now we're getting into enterprise. So obviously these problems are expected. So I'm not surprised. And then he opens his backlog and he's like, until we do this thing, I don't think we will be able to meet the customer expectations and quality of search. I'm like, okay, so basically you're saying that we have to totally rework our indexing. And that means it's going to be a long project. And he's like, yeah, exactly. So like he was bringing his own challenges and internal politics and frustration of how he's not been able to prioritize, and no PM ever prioritized the usual engineering PM tension, where PM gets customer facing features, and then the engineering has been telling forever that, hey, we are not ready for scale because we've not made our backend ready for this kind of volume. So he's bringing his frustration, and I'm like, okay, but this means another 3 to 6 months, and I don't have that kind of time. 30 days, we've already made a commitment, and we have to do something. He's like, see, Asif, hacks will not work. You're going to again do some other hack to make it work for this customer. And you're just postponing a problem. It's going to come again. I was like, okay, this conversation again not helping. So what do? Again, I go back to analytics and I start looking at what's going on customer behavior. And I think that is the one that, so we were using Heap at that point. And then I remember I started looking at what's really going on with the search experience for this customer, or even actually across. So one thing I noticed was, let's go to the first problem, which is about the search being very slow. So I was like, okay, let me understand what they mean by slow. Like, what are they really doing? So I realized that we had this search thing at the top, the magnifying glass. You go and search, and then most of the times there was a massive drop off after you search. So okay, I'll tell you how the product works. You search for it, and then there is a quick drawer that comes and shows you a few results. And after that, you either click on one of the links if your result is there, and then we used to show like top 4 results across 4 different indices. Like there were tickets, there were like knowledge-based, let's say, articles, and then there were these forum queries and all that. So there were like 4 categories of data that were being shown, and then you can select either one of those and then go to your page, or if you didn't find anything there, then you hit enter, and then it takes you a page which has more results. So we thought most of the times people either pick one of those results that we give, because you're showing a selection of 5 in each category, so it should be in your top 5. If not, you go to a page. But the funny thing is, there's a huge drop off from that page. Like people are actually not clicking there anymore. There's a drop off in the journey. So the natural thing is, whatever I told you, it was not happening. So drop off I meant was, after the search there, then immediately they're actually going and clicking the tickets button, which is another page to access tickets. And then they're looking at all the tickets. And then most of the times I was like, okay, which page are they going? Are they going to page 2, page 3? I was like, most of the times it's page 1, and it's the page 1 had 30 results. So they're somehow finding it on the page 1. I was like, okay, so this made sense. And then I started looking at, okay, in the drawer that they're getting, are they even clicking on articles or any of the other categories? And I realized that whoever even waited to actually finish their entire journey that they were supposed to, nobody was clicking on articles. I was like, okay, that's helpful. So one thing it became very clear to me over time is, most of the people, after I analyzed data, I realized the drop off is because people are coming, searching. They're not getting what they want in the drawer at all. And people are just leaving that page, clicking on tickets as a button. And that's how they're going and searching for tickets, because that seems to be faster. And I was like, okay, interesting. So basically and this has become a pattern for all the customers. Like I started going back and talking to other customers also. And I actually asked them, hey, like, how do you actually go and search for a ticket you created in the last 10 days or something as an agent? And then they were like, oh, I don't even go to the search. It's usually very slow. All I do is click on tickets and I go there and I search. And I usually have this ticket ID. I just put the ticket ID. I'm not even going to type words. Like, who types words? I know the ID. I mean, because support agents, yeah, like, these are like smart people who create hacks. They know how to get to things. They're not going to waste their time trying to. So yeah, they're not going to search for words there. Like, they literally go and ask for booking ID or whatever ID. Somebody raised the request. You ask them, hey, like, what was your ticket or what was your past issue? And then you literally go and then search for the ID. So I was like, oh, okay. So the way you're searching is based on your ID. You're honestly not even using the search the way it was supposed to be. The way it was built was people will come type, oh, order or food or whatever, chicken or whatever. You'll find search for it and look at last 10 days of issues where it were according to this those word match, and then you go and click on those. But that feature was built like the solution architect said 8 years ago, when long ago Freshdesk as a product started with like an average number of agents were 3-4 agents. And yeah, they've not thought about the scale and how agents are operating. And that's when I was like, okay, so let's think about how do we creatively solve this. And then I go and talk to actually again this enterprise customer. It's like, hey, do you really think they care about a search? Like, because from what I'm learning, customers don't really go even from the search. And since we have 30-day launch, do we really need to go and solve a search problem? Because they can go through tickets, they're going to go based on ID. I was like, Asif, what you're saying is true. That's probably how eventually they're going to use the product. But I cannot launch this, or the leader is not going to sign off on something like this, knowing that they have like hundreds of agents across the world who just cannot use the search because search is slow. And these people are not going to be your efficient agent who is going to start off with the ID. So again, enterprise customers, when you start off with them, you have to make sure that everything works. There's a checklist. Like everybody literally, maybe they will not have this checklist. There is hypothetical checklist that everything needs to work good before you actually train and onboard rest of your company. You're not going to introduce a product to customers or set up a training session when you know that the experience is not ideal, because those agents will start complaining, hey, my previous product was very fast, why am I having to use this? Yeah, nobody loves training experiences when you know that the experience can be suboptimal than before. So the bar is usually very high, especially when you're dealing with this kind of scenario. So then we were like, okay, let's do one thing. Anyway, most of the times people are searching is for tickets. That's what analytics is telling me. And the drawer is honestly not useful. So I came up, yeah, exactly. Then I just worked with the UX designers. This is actually one thing Freshworks does really well, which is every PM is mapped with one designer and one solution architect. So we kind of work like a pod. So, and that kind of helps a lot because we can quickly iterate and come up with mockups and then have a review. And then we decide what to pick and work rather than going through this, hey, I have this one nice idea, and then I write a document, and then I spend some months trying to figure out what to do, and then get approval for a designer. I've seen that in some other companies, but honestly, this is very convenient. I literally, in my one-on-ones, I'll tell my designer, hey, I have this idea. I think this might solve this problem. What do you think? In my next one-on-one, the designer will come with like 3-4 mockups, and we are like, oh, these are cool thoughts. Like, and then we double dive, and then I'm pretty sure the designers spend a lot of designs which we probably pick only maybe 1 out of 10 we talk about. But yeah, this agile methodology was like extremely friendly for a PM. Like I used to love that. And anyway, so this is what we did. I was like, hey, why don't we just remove everything else from the drawer? Just make it about tickets, because people are just searching for tickets. And if you want, there are again UX hacks here. Like instead of having like four in a row, or like let's say sequentially, why don't you make 4 tabs? And tickets is always the first tab. Just load tickets. If people click on any of the others, we can intentionally load those. I doubt anybody's going to do that anyway. So let's just focus on tickets for now. Show the top 10 tickets. Again, why did I arrive at 10 tickets? I realized that out of the tickets on the full ticket page, we used to show 30, but most of the time, 80% of the use cases were the first 10. Yeah. The 20% use case of bottom 20 is not relevant. Again, these are all like some database decisions I was trying to take, because I was like, yeah, we shouldn't be trying to solve for again the 100% use case here. So we came up with this markup. We had this alternative experience where we try to cleverly hack the UX there, saying let's just focus on tickets and get the top 10, and then yeah, you click on it and then you get to the page. Almost similar experience, but we just did a clever UX hack there because we think customers want tickets. And again, now again comes the logistic issues. I go back and I was like, hey, I want to do this A/B experiment. I want to release this new UX for Freshdesk search. This is enterprise ready feature, and this will become handy for future. And then immediately gets shot down saying, hey, you're not going to do an A/B experiment because just one enterprise customer is coming. What about these other 50,000 other SMB customers who've been liking this? And we're not going to do an A/B experiment like this, because if you do the experiment, we obviously know those other customers are going to find this new, they will be unhappy, and we can't take that risk. Again, this is a volumes game, right? So, and then I was like, okay, this is hard to deal with, because I have data which says that the other 50,000
Emotional
customers are
validation.
also not happy with it. They've not been using it. But again, when you're at that scale, pre-IPO company, you are extremely cautious. This was not the Freshdesk 5-6 years ago, which could take any risk and just do anything and then break it and then figure out how we'll fix. The pre-IPO scrutiny is high. So I was like, okay, then again, this is where again you have to, as a PM, I think, take these hacks. I was like, okay, let's do one thing. Let's just limit the experiment just to this one customer. Anyway, you're saying the volume is high. Let's just do randomization across their users, and we should just be okay with that small n or whatever, and then let's just do it for 2 weeks. Just for 2 weeks, let them have these split experience, and then we will see how the behavior is. And although the engineers were not convinced that this is a great strategy, they were like, hey, like your n is small, it's not going to make any sense. I'm like, let's just do it. Like, we will at least know how the cohorts are behaving different, right? And yeah, I'm like, we did that. And then one thing we've noticed is the other cohort, as usual, was not even using it. This cohort, at least they were using it. Like when I say using it, like people were at least following the workflow we had. You search, you click on the link. Most of the people were just clicking on the link. They didn't even have to go to the next page. They were not even hitting the enter anymore, which they had to. So you were getting those top 10 results, most of the times the top 4 or 5, and you're done. And then that was actually like very obviously a good data point for me to be like, hey, in that cohort, you're having the same scenario as today for rest of our customers, and in this scenario you're way better. I mean, obviously it's not statistically significant, but do you think this is good enough for us to go ahead? And then they were like, oh no, we'll do this only as private data, we will enable this only for this one customer. I'm like, no, this is where I'm going to, like, the PM was going to push back. I was like, I can clearly see data here that the customer is happy, and there is no way we're going to do a private beta only for this customer. If anything, we've discovered this nice feature which is actually making everybody's experience better. So I'm going to propose that we do an A/B experiment for the rest of the customers, and because we found something, we're not going to push it for everybody, but now we're not going to launch it. Again, this is another thing I generally think is a huge challenge in B2B space when you deal with enterprise customers. The thing that Brijesh was asking earlier is that the top 3-4 customers tend to have these massive feature requirements which are very different from each other, and you're breaking your head figuring out, hey, like, do I build this feature only for this one customer, or do I build it in a way that works for all the customers, or should I ship it for all the customers? Most of the times you're torn between that, and then you tend to have these private beta access or private allow list access to just a few customers. It kind of works fine in the short term, but eventually, it's a confusing situation where you start becoming like this consulting vendor where you're building different nature of your products to different customers, and your product doesn't look, it's not even meant for scale. You're not a product company anymore if you keep doing that, because products are
Yeah.
supposed, the whole point is you build something and then you make money out of multiple customers or serve needs of multiple customers, right? So again, it's always convenient to just have features behind feature flags and enable it for a few customers and then get done with it and move on. But managing that feature flags mess is extremely painful. I remember we spent a lot of time at Splunk where we were like, oh, there were so many features behind feature flags. And we literally spent like 1 quarter cleaning up the entire feature flag thing. I was like, let's just add 20% of our roadmap, just clean feature flags. Like, I'm going to spend time looking at whichever feature flag needs to be either deprecated or released. You're not going to have this gray zone of sitting behind a feature flag. And anyway, so what happened eventually was we did an experiment, and then it was not as conclusive as I was hoping to be for rest of customers, because there were other issues. We realized for other customers that the top 10 thing wasn't working. They obviously weren't finding the top 10, so we had more issues there. So eventually we realized that UX wasn't good, so we had to like make more changes to the UX. Eventually, we improved the drawer to 15. And then somebody argued that, hey, why do you even need the drawer? Just they type in search, hit enter, we just take it to that page itself. So we took that option also, eventually experimented. And I think we thought it was too radical directly take them to the tickets page. So eventually took a judgment call that although data says that it might be better just take them to the tickets page directly, it's a radical change. Again, thinking about scale and then this pre-hyper thing, we were like, let's do it in phases. So the first thing we took was we increased the draw to 15 tickets. And then we wrote in the roadmap that in Q3, Q4, we'll eventually figure out just if you can just take them directly to the tickets page rather than having them draw. So yeah, like there were these phases and iteration we had to do. So we solved that thing for the customer went live. There are two other search stories also I'm happy to talk about, but I don't know if you have time for those. But for this feature specifically, yeah, like this is how we tackled it. And it was like almost, yeah, like had to distribute this work over like 6 months. The customer went live, but remaining 5 months went into figuring out how to GA this. And that's the, again, long timeline in enterprise customers.
No, this was so fun, dude. Like, I think this hit every sort of thing that a PM sort of comes across in such large projects. Like, one,
Yeah.
like you don't know why this is not working. Then you have to spend some time trying to figure out why is this not working, that too for a specific set of people. When you find the answer and then you have to like deal with like the org to sort of navigate a solution that clearly is somewhat working, but it's hard to sort of push through in the org as well. And then of course,
Oh,
like
yeah.
with scale, like Freshwork comes, like no customer is same. So you have to find some weird middle ground that nobody is happy with, but everybody has to sort of somewhat live with. But this is very classic. And these are the kind of stories that we honestly wanted to bring out of these podcasts, right?
Yeah.
Because everything looks so sexy and rosy from the outside, and people forget the kind of like compromises that need to happen to sort of make things move forward. And yeah,
Yeah.
this is an amazing story. uh, I think we have like touched almost everything that we wanted to touch in terms
Yeah.
of like seeing what life looks like for somebody who's working on products like this. So I'll actually let Suhas sort of wrap it up. We had a bunch of questions for you, like more on
Yeah.
the like regular PM side of things to wrap this up in a fun way. But this was an amazing story, Asif. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
absolutely. I
thank you for
feel
the
like,
questions. Yeah.
yeah. No, I just concur with what Brijesh said. I think, um, see, outside it feels like it's so smooth, right? Like this tells you like actual product management is getting into, and it's definitely not smooth, right? Like you don't have a direct answer to anything, right? To start with, it's
Yeah.
a blank slate. You figure out small problems. So I think, thanks for articulating it so well. I think we had a couple of questions just to nudge you in those directions, but then we're like, okay, hey, this is going in the right direction. We just don't need to nudge you anywhere. So thanks so much for actually just bringing out the reality of product management. I think that is what this segment was. I think I'll probably end it with what we call the curious corner. It's just a one or two very fun questions outside of product management. In this case, yes, a little bit of product management. In today's set of questions, I was curious about two questions. First one, as if the impact of uh, AI in general, right? One, hey, what do you think is going to happen to product management in 2024 and beyond? Maybe you could take a 3-year time scale. You've seen a couple of years of product management, and what do you think the next 2-3 years will look like? And second bit of this AI and product management is, apart from ChatGPT, which segment of your life do you really use AI in? So these are two bits that I'm very curious about.
Yeah. Okay, going back to the first one on direction of product management, I think so. I've been in PM space, I think, more than 8 years now. So, but yeah, it was always mostly focused on B2B enterprise play and slightly dabbling with SMB. So, one thing I've realized along the way is the part that differentiates, I think, PMs. I mean, I shouldn't say I've cracked this well. Like it's something like I also keep getting pushed in like some of the meetings and like working with these amazing people because I've always tried to optimize for people. I was like, I don't care what problem because if you see, I kept switching industries. Like it was ed tech, social impact
Yeah.
tech, CRM, observability, video. So for me, the problem doesn't matter. I want to jam with smart people who make me think better. That's literally the direction I'm going at this point. That's all I know what I'm doing. So how will product management change? So I keep thinking about this, and I keep talking to some of my other PM peers. And I've also been trying to use ChatGPT, Perplexity in my day-to-day work, and I try to see how much value it adds in my life. I mean, right now, if I think about it, the crux of the PM's work is honestly about identifying the real problem, because we spend so much time. I think writing the feature requirement solutioning is honestly probably just 10% of the intellectual work. I mean, obviously, you have to go and make things work. I mean, I'm not saying solutioning is easy. Solutioning has other set of challenges which are not, let's say, individual thinking, or not even individual. I think, yeah, the intellectual work is not really happening there. The work there is mostly about dealing with orgs, dealing with people's egos, people persuading, like influence. So in terms of the effort, probably it will take more, but the intellectual work is happening in the problem
Yeah.
solving phase. And I don't know if Gen AI will help us get it. Is not at least doing it today. Like for instance, literally even now when I think about writing features, I'm like, oh, I still have to go and do customer interviews. I still have to go and talk to my user in some form. I can't be looking at just dashboards and assumptions about my user. Even my Freshworks story, although it was SMB play, I figured out that we were so distant from our user in certain scenarios. I mean, Freshworks, amazing company, did a lot of things great, but certain nuances like these, we realized that being distant from the user was hurting us. So I don't know if Gen AI will help us. It will probably just be an enabler in being able to like optimize and be efficient with that process. Like for instance, I remember, like, okay, I'll tell you how I'm doing it today. So I do a lot of these interviews, but then it saves my time in doing the transcripts, saves my time doing the summaries, and then eventually translating that to writing user stories. So that's the part it's optimizing, but I'm still relevant in trying to infer from the user stories as to the real pain. Because one thing I tell about PM is never try to hear the customer solution. Always try to separate out what because customers love giving you solutions. Everybody thinks they're a PM. They are like, yeah, dude, you should go build this feature, and that's going to make this easier. Instead of this button, why don't you put it there? Yeah, like make it a radio thing. Why are you doing this? And I'm like, no, like, can you please tell me what your exact problem is? Like, I think that is where we are still applying a lot of our intellectual curiosity. And I think that part, I don't know how it can be automated. Maybe it may be automated, but I don't think the PM's relevance will go. And PMs have to be on their toes, especially in this phase. I think we can't delegate that. At least that's how I think in the near future. And the way it's going to shape, I don't think it's going to change drastically there. It's just going to make us faster. Like instead of spending 2 months to figure out what the MVP will look like, probably we'll do it in 30 days, maybe in 3 weeks. So I see optimizations happening. I don't know how much of it can be really changed. I don't have the template answer, but I myself have been figuring out every other day, trying to use
Sure.
ChatGPT. It's honestly not really, yeah, like removing. I was like, yeah, make me relevant. I'll go spend time learning how to write apps, but I'm
Yeah.
not seeing that at the moment. Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And on the second bit, any workflow that AI is sitting in today, other than ChatGPT for you? Any tools, any workflows?
Yeah, in terms of AI tools today, I think, yeah, like I've been heavily indexing on using Perplexity as my search rather than starting off Google search. So I've done my own behavioral change. Originally, it used to be always Google search. So I'm finding Perplexity way better in terms of how the experience is. So that's definitely changed in my way of doing things. And like I said, my AI usage has largely been in automating transcripts. Like going through user interviews used to be extremely painful, honestly, like where you do like 30 customer interviews and then go through a lot of those transcripts and then try to like crystallize the notes and then come up with a gist and then write user stories. That part I think has been really like, yeah, I just put it through ChatGPT, I put it through Perplexity and then see how the summaries are. And then I was like, oh, okay, this is actually saving a lot of my time. I don't have to waste my time on this stuff. But yeah, the product proposals, pricing proposals, I still have to do it of my own because yeah, you need a lot of nuance thinking that you can't expect those products to do. So yeah, at least that's how it's been for me. I'm curious to hear, like, yeah, Brajesh, how have you been using Audience OS? Yeah.
I feel
Fair.
like at this point, my theory is that anything that you can write an SOP for, and you could imagine hiring an intern for, uh, you can probably find a tool. or like hack together a tool that will do a semi decent job. Like your transcript thing is a classic use case, right? Like in an alt universe, we would find like a very enthusiastic college intern to sort of come and do that work. But now you have AI to sort of replace that work. So every time I think of a work, I see if I can write a clean SOP for how to do that work really well. And if I can be very specific, then I start go looking for a tool. Because if I can't be specific about how to do this work really well, I find it hard to believe that any AI currently out there can do it really well. That's how we think about Segwise as well. The most
Yes.
structured part of PMing is what we're going after, right? Like there's a very methodical way in which you root cause metrics, and there's a very methodical way in which you take a root cause and then take next steps. Especially if you narrow the problem down to like, hey, I will only do this for consumer apps, or only doing this for a specific vertical of consumer apps. When you narrow it down that sharply, then you can write very crisp SOPs for how things should happen and what should happen next based on various outcomes that you are most likely to see in an RCA. And then it becomes easier to sort of automate a bunch of stuff. So, yeah, that's where I am. I feel like if an SOP is possible, then it's possibly easy to automate that. But like you said, a large part of the high ROI work in PMing is not like clearly from your story, right? Like it's you can't write an SOP for that stuff. It's hard to
Yeah.
sort of figure out how do you sort of go from where you started the story to like how it eventually shipped. Those parts I think are still going to be up in the air and like probably made faster, but not taken away completely.
True. Yeah, no, this was awesome. I think, Asif, like, I think we were sharing backstage. We'd love to invite you again. And I think lots of stories, but we're trying to do these in bite sized formats so that, every story we can go a little bit more in depth on. But like you shared, I think lots of more stories to uncover with you. Thanks so much once again for joining us today and, going in depth on, enterprise search. And I think Brajesh and me also really enjoyed listening to that. Um, yeah, thanks so much, Asif, for sharing this, and we will
Yeah,
definitely come back to you much more.
yeah, this was super fun. Honestly, I think you guys should definitely reach out to more people because this format is very unique. When I say unique, I know where the inspiration is. You shared this with me, Videsh, earlier, but yeah, this is one thing I think PMs, yeah, like the BTS part, like people are like not don't really get to talk about it. Like these are things
Yeah,
that
Exactly.
it's very
you
kosher.
complain over, yeah, beer or maybe a coffee chat saying that, hey, dude, like I'm having to deal with all this stuff. And then you talk about it and you forget, right? Like you don't really get to even document this as for learnings for future, even internally or externally or for your own career. Like the behavioral stories are again the glossy numbers. Oh, did this much percentage increase in revenue, this much percentage in metrics, and you're done. But you're not really taking away for anything for your future in terms of how you do PMing better. So I think, yeah, I really love the format, and yeah, I would love to see what more stories come out of it. There's so many other products there that are
Yeah,
really good stories, and especially B2B is very hard to get. So I would love it if you are doing coverage for B2B stories for sure.
Yeah, for
we
sure.
will, we will for sure.
Awesome.
No, awesome. Brajesh, until next time, see
Yeah,
you
man.
on the other side.